Thank you, Senator.
I just want to say, on a personal note, I'm so pleased that you beat your cancer diagnosis.
You're very kind.
We all followed your unfortunately public dealing with that. And,
My bandana made it public, I think. Yes.
But it was a nice touch. It was a nice touch, and I'm sorry about your son.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I gather, Congressman, that you support trying to make the world carbon neutral by 2050?
Yes.
Okay. And I gather from your testimony that, in your judgment, part of achieving that goal is eliminating the use of fossil fuel generated energy?
Not immediately.
Right.
But there are staged reductions that would be required in order for us to meet that goal. And I don't think it requires the absolute elimination of all carbon fuels, but I think something like a steady 4% per year reduction.
By 2050, how much do we need to eliminate?
Well, what the scientists are telling us is that we in order to avert the most extreme calamities, we need to limit the global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius.
But here's what I'm getting at. Right now, America relies on fossil fuels for 80% of its energy. By 2050, what percentage do you think that should be in order for us to become carbon neutral?
I better not opine on that because I don't know, but I will tell you this, and I see where you're going. This is a tremendous challenge, maybe the greatest challenge of our lifetimes, and I think it...
I understand. I'm sorry. Yeah. Just give me a little bit of time here.
Yeah.
Are you... Let me ask you this. How many people are there in the world? What's the world's population?
Is it now 4.5 billion?
It's about 8 billion.
Is it 8 billion?
I'm not trying to trick you.
Right.
I had to look it up myself.
I should have updated on that.
It's 8 billion people live in the world.
8 billion, okay.
4 billion people depend on fertilizer made by natural gas to eat. If we didn't have natural gas, 4 billion people would starve to death. What do we do about that?
So that is,
fuels.
I mean, that's precisely the challenge that we need to be confronting and that we should have been confronting all these decades. How do we disengage gradually from one model of energy consumption and move into another so that we are meeting the public health goals that are urgent, as the distinguished senator from New Mexico just...
Are you familiar with what's called a boreal forest?
No, only in those...
forests in the northernmost part of the world, just below the Arctic, in North America, in Eurasia. There are millions of acres burned there naturally every year. The fires are less today than they were 150 years ago, but obviously forest fires produce carbon. And I was reading a study this weekend. I want to get my facts straight here. They said the carbon released by these naturally occurring forest fires in boreal forests, nobody lives there. Let's see. Wildfires in the boreal forests in North America and Eurasia in 1 year, 2021, released double the amount of all global CO2 produced in 2001. And 3 times as much as the Inflation Reduction Act is projected to reduce by 2030. My point is, the Inflation Reduction Act is going to end up costing about $1.2 trillion. Presumably, there are estimates about how much carbon it will reduce by 2030. American people are going to spend a lot of money, $1.2 trillion. For what? The carbon released by naturally occurring boreal forest fires in 2001 is 3 times the amount we'll save by asking the American people to spend $1.2 trillion of their money on the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, you know, unless you're the reason that your parents drink, that doesn't make sense, does it?
So thank you. I mean, it's a trenchant question, Senator. I've heard these comparisons before between natural greenhouse gas emissions, which are obviously a product of forestry and agriculture and the agricultural revolution, and what we contribute through industrial greenhouse gas emissions. But I think it's a bit of a distraction from the real issue because we take for granted.
These are peer-reviewed studies, Congressman.
Oh no, but I mean, the peer-reviewed studies show
exist. I promise you.
Oh no, but I'm not doubting the science for 1 minute. I'm saying let's take the science for granted. Let's take nature for granted. Thank God that we have forests and we have greenhouse gas emissions that come from agriculture and so on. All of that is something that we take for granted. Okay, now we also, however, can reduce agricultural greenhouse gas emissions through looking at industrial livestock practices.
My point is, I'm going way over. This is my last question.
Yeah.
We spend all this money. Okay, it's going to cost America about $1 trillion a year to make us carbon neutral by 2050.
Yes.
We don't lower world temperatures a scintilla of a degree if you look at the boreal forest fires. So what do?
Oh, I got you. But would you dispute that it would be far worse if we do nothing? In other words, if we stay on the path that big oil would have us stay on, are you denying that we would be in a situation where the Earth's temperature goes up?
That's not your goal in trying to make us carbon neutral. Is to be. It's a zero-sum game. Your goal is not to make it better. Your point is, as I understand it, that the world will end if we don't achieve the carbon neutrality.
Right. We want to prevent calamity. We want to make our one planetary habitat as livable as possible, right?
Do we need to spend trillions of dollars fighting the boreal forest fires?
Well, let's go back to the Inflation Reduction Act, which you invoked before. Most of the money which you're describing as being spent on climate change measures was actually tax incentives for the stimulation of renewable energy.
Agreed, but they're not stopping the boreal forest fires. I mean, we spend all this money and we reduce carbon, and the boreal forest fires just spit out 3 times the amount of carbon.
All right, do you?
What's the point?
I would love to read a peer-reviewed study on that. I mean, if we need a boreal forest.
Economist magazine, they talk about it all the time.
All right, I will check that out. But I mean, is the suggestion that we need a boreal forest fire department?
I'm asking you. I mean, well, what y'all's position is, I get it. Nobody's perfect. Oil and gas is bad, and they're destroying the world. Let's get rid of them.
Yeah.
Okay. If we do that, that's going to cost a lot? If we do that, is the world going to be okay? No.
I got you. I see where you're going. But let's, if I might, Mr. Chairman, if I could just take your beautiful state, which is very close to my heart. I lived in New Orleans a couple of times.
Come back and spend money.
But I definitely will. I plan to do that. Louisiana has traditionally dealt with hurricanes, but is now experiencing hurricanes of much greater velocity and much greater ferocity under the climate change conditions.
Really?
Well, then perhaps the science that I've been seeing is...
The damages are higher because Louisiana's wealthier and there's more to destroy. But if you look at the studies on the intensity, they're about the same.
All right, but
Kennedy, Senator Kane is waiting to proceed. If you don't,
we were just having a good talk.
No, and I'm enjoying this. Actually, I'm not complaining.
I'm sorry, Timmy. I'm sorry. Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you, Senator.
Just for the record, my research while Senator Kennedy was speaking is that the total wildfire emissions or 1.8 billion tons of CO2 compared to 38 billion tons from fossil and industry. So we may have a dispute over the facts here. But with that, let me turn it over to Senator Kaine.